Okay, for those who are joining us on the live stream, this is another episode in real life software design. This is discussing features for the upcoming version of Wolfram Language. This is a miscellaneous box, our incremental language development effort. So let's get started. So sequence replace is first on our list. What is the issue here?
So we have discussed this in the past, and there is an asymmetry between the sequences on the left and sequences on the right. And we are not sure yet of what to choose on the right-hand side, whether to have an additional level of list or not. And there are several advantages and disadvantages in both choices.
Okay, so the issue is args triple blank, that thing represents the list. Then the args is going to bind to the sequence, and then this is going to say, turn that into a list, right?
That's replace notation. So,
yeah. What am I
so in sequence replace, the question is whether, yes, so we will have a list representing a sequence on the left-hand side. The question is whether we want that list also on the right-hand side. Currently, the current implementation does not have it. So if we want to splice a sequence on the right-hand side, then we have to use explicitly sequence.
Okay, so wait a minute. So can we see an actual example here? I mean, is this some?
Yes, the documentation. That I guess that's why Xavier wanted.
Okay, so what he's saying here, so sequence replace,
yes,
E goes to E.
Exactly, and so we don't have to say list E on the right-hand side.
I don't think we should have to. But now the issue is if E is a sequence there.
Exactly.
If E is bound to a double blank or something, what does it do? And the answer is, I mean, what it should do is to splice it, doesn't it? I mean, it naturally splices it.
Well, we have to use sequence, right, Xavier?
Yes, no, we do have to use sequence if we have more than one element.
Why? Oh, I see, because you have to collect. I see what you're saying. In other words, if the right-hand side destination represents a multiple object, oh boy, that's a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if we didn't have other sequence functions, then we would just, I don't think we have this in external yet, right, Xavier?
No, not yet.
Okay. Okay, but so the issue is, Itai, do you have a point of view about this?
No. I haven't been deep enough in sequence replace to really have an opinion.
Okay.
If this function was alone, I would vote for having a list on the right-hand side as well. What Xavier has pointed out here on the left is that we have other sequence functions, and not having that list aligns sequence replace better with the other functions, sequence cases and the future sequence split.
Okay, wait a minute. Sequence cases does what in that situation? So sequence cases will return. So if I do sequence cases of this, and I say, for example, just, X double blank here.
Yeah. Well, what's a good example, Xavier, of having a rule on the right-hand side?
Actually, let's do this. X blank, Y blank, X blank. Actually, X, Y double blank there, Y triple blank there. Why does it only give one of these? Maybe there is only one in that list. Let me just put in something else, another case here. Okay.
Yes, so now if we wanted to replace that sequence by something else, we would use a list on the second a rule in the second argument.
Yes, so let's say we want to replace it by that. What on earth is that doing? That is pretty wild. I mean, if I were to, so if I replace that by f of y, okay. So in that first case, it's a sequence. The head is a sequence and it's auto splicing.
Yes. So I guess the main point is that we don't have to use an explicit list on the right-hand side always.
Right. And that's what you're proposing is the same as would happen in sequence replace.
Exactly. So
Yes.
That it will become an auto splicer, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, and one of the issues there is if you wanted to have multiple things that splice, then the only way to do that here would be to have a sequence on the right-hand side.
yes, I think there is some example in the reference page.
So I mean, for example, here we could say sequence YYY, and then it will splice like that. Yeah, well, I think we have to have consistency with this. I don't really see how we can avoid doing that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, does anybody want to argue for the idea that you have lists on the right-hand side of sequence replace? Somebody is asking us if we can zoom our notebooks a bit. Well, sure, we can zoom it a bit. I thought we didn't need to actually. I thought this was I thought we had beautiful reproduction of I'm going to go to 125%. I'm afraid not 200% because otherwise we don't get enough on the screen. I hope that's better. Okay. Go ahead. So
yeah, I'm recently also more in favor of the first option, the one we have currently implemented.
Okay, fine. Let's go for it. I think there's really no choice. I think we've cooked that particular goose already with the other functions.
Okay.
Is there anything about sequence split that we should be aware of in this regard?
No, this will be very similar to sequence replace and sequence case.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. So
I started looking at, oh my gosh, what on earth is this? Did I send in my proposals for other curry names?
I don't think so. So in the last meeting, you asked us to generate this list of related names so that we get some inspiration of possible connections.
Okay, let's not spend this whole meeting talking about names of curry. I actually had some ideas, I think. Let me take a look. I think I made some notes on my own here. Let's take a look. SW only. Okay, so I was thinking about things like, first of all, I think currying function is better than curry if we really have to go that route. It is a currying function. Because I think we were getting confused about, is curry curry or uncurry? But I'm sort of, you know, there are different cases here because there's this case, the default case, where all we're doing is to have that single, you know, where the main objective is just first becomes last type thing, where we have something of the form, you know, curry partition, you know, 3 range of 10. That case there, where that is a very specific, what on earth happened to that? Oh, that's because we flipped curry now. Right, do we think we want that? I don't even know how we do this now. How do we do this? Do we do 2-1 here?
I think we introduce a curry second.
Okay.
So that was the last name we.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're going to need to name that second operation. And these are deeply obscure. I mean, deeply, deeply obscure. I was thinking about, you know, these things, what we call it ourselves as an operator form, usually.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little weird to call it operator. I mean, if you saw in a piece of code, you know, operator of partition, I don't know whether it will help you very much.
I don't think so. And I think it would be a waste of such an important name.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. I think there are many other things we'd want to call operator before that.
Right. So there's also applicator, whatever that might mean. I mean, the notion that it is doing something to do with function application seems useful to capture in the name.
Yep.
And, you know, applied or something, or some weird thing like that. I mean, you know, if we named it something like applicator, it's pretty weird. It has a certain sense of, you know, cosmetics product or something like this, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, we got to really be thinking, what does this thing actually do? You know, the name that I had for this kind of construct in SMP, tier, other than the fact that it's a crazy, unpronounceable kind of weird word, is, I mean, you know, it is the thing that is going between, you know, that type of form and the varargs form. I mean, that would be one way to describe it. You know, I don't know how. It would be lovely if we could find a description of this that wasn't, you know, as obscure as the curry word.
Some word containing bracket.
Yeah, I think you were suggesting that. I mean, the debracketed or something. But that just seems.
It's structural, but it goes to the point of what this function is. It's structural rather than semantic.
Or it's a function-related thing where you're basically saying, you know, look, one thing is one argument at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why in SMP 8 years ago or something, I had this name tier, which is, you know, is the thing in multiple tiers or is it all in one go, so to speak? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is it sort of a hierarchy of function applications? I don't know. I'm gonna see Christopher tomorrow, and he's somebody who might have a good idea about this. I'm gonna bug him about this. Let's not burn up our whole meeting with this today. So let's continue. I think that was we've got to solve that problem, obviously, but it's just a name.
Okay. So do we have Arnoud? Not yet. So he wanted to attend this conversation of tokenize. So let's give him a bit more time. Let's go to the next one, the semantic import.
Okay.
Yes. So I think this is an important suggestion, which is basically what's an easy way to provide headings for a data set? So,
yes, that is a good question. Right.
So if we have, this happens even for a metric. So if we have a matrix and we want to construct a data set with given headings, both columns and rows, what's a good way of doing it?
Right. Good question. Okay. Is there somebody here who wants to talk about that, or do we have a? I mean, I understand that. Is anybody from this list here, or are we making this up ourselves?
No.
I made a suggestion months ago about you know, special constructor forms for data set. I mean, I guess this is a slightly different. I mean, this is I mean, what you have just typed in is a different question than what's here, which is the question here is there's already row and column headings in the matrix, and you just want to label them as such.
Well, hold on. There's multiple cases here. So one case is you've got
but the one that was discussed in the thread is the one I just mentioned.
Okay, could you repeat that one?
So you already have rows and column headings in your data, whether that's, you know, a spreadsheet you're importing or whatever, and you want to
preserve them. Right. So to my mind, what that should be is a DataSet import. So if I say file.csv, my claim is that that's what should happen if you do this. Now I know, and I just failed to see it in the meeting right before this one. There's a bunch of updates to the CSV importer. I don't know whether they've done this.
This is done. That is done.
So you're telling me if I have a spreadsheet and I say dataset, it will import the headings.
Headings, I don't know, but
that's the question.
Okay.
Right. So I mean, if I have a CSV file, let's take a look whether there's an example CSV file here. By the way, could you point out to somebody that in 11.3 xkernel, all the documentation is opening with everything.
Okay. Yeah.
open.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
That was reported like a week or two ago. I don't know why it's not fixed yet.
Okay. All right. Fine. So, okay. So the question here is, I mean, both in import and export. Can we ask? Maybe we can find who is working on doing what's that?
Sean is working on it. I'm asking him.
Okay. Can we join? Can you get him to join?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so anyway, so that's the first thing, is making sure that when there is an outside source that has labels on the rows and columns, that we preserve those, right? Yeah, Itai, that was what you were saying there.
Well, not necessarily on outside things, but
well, what will be an inside thing that has these?
Well, you've created.
Yes, I agree. This is a case where I'd love to be able to do that. January, February, March, April, whatever, as the column labels. And how would I do that?
Right.
Right, because what that is going to turn into is a nested association of associations. And that's kind of a weird operation for us right now.
So I have been thinking a bit about this. I think what we need is some sort of mixture between threading and folding. So imagine that we have a function that takes, the first argument is rule. The second is a list of headings at different levels. And the third is the array. And that returns already all these nested rules already organized at the various levels.
Okay, so let's understand what you're proposing. So this is essentially what we're doing is we're representing the indices at each level, right? So this thing here has indices 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So what we are defining is a mapping from those indices to some association indices, for example, I would claim. So what would we call such a thing? Go ahead.
Then Sean is here.
Okay, great. Okay. And he's got the correct Zoom session. Yep. Sean, are you seeing the screen?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay, so we had a question. Actually, okay, we'll come back. Just let me. Okay, we'll be back. We're talking about CSV importers and preserving column and row headings on those. But let's just discuss one more thing. So does anybody have a potential name for the function? So this function, blah, 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 is going to take, essentially, one thing it could take is a list of lists for each level of label 1, label 2 for the first level, label 1, label 2 for the second level, etc. Is that correct? Or alternatively, it could take lists of rules here that apply differently. Okay, so who's sending this? Itai is sending.
Yeah, something. So this is a thread from May about if you've created your own matrix and you want to.
So this is the piece of data, and what you want to do is to turn that into an association.
Right, and here's the code. A couple of different ways to take the code and turn it into an association you want.
Okay. That's pretty ornate. Okay.
Yeah. So, and what I said, we probably want something like, a second argument, row headings, column headings.
For what?
For these cases, right, where it just tells it, treat the first row as
No,
heading.
I understand, but what are those options to?
They're not options. They're second arguments to dataset.
What does dataset right now do for its second argument?
It doesn't have one, I don't think.
Right. So I see. So what you're suggesting is that there is a
We have actually a second argument.
What's that?
We do have a second argument in the full form, but it's a type of the data, but it's not useful. So we can think of.
Yeah, that's just so long as we have compatibility mechanisms for that. And anyway, we've been poor, and hopefully you're greatly improving it, Xavier, on the maintainability of dataset across sessions and so on.
Yeah.
But look, I think this is a pretty common case that you see stuff like this. But I would be prepared to imagine, a 2-argument form. What on earth will we call such a function?
I think we need here something more powerful that works. I mean, if we need one of these functions that takes an F and a G, like inner, we need some sort of multi-level version of inner. So what I would call this something like foldthread. It's a mixture of folding and threading.
Oh gosh, okay.
And then it will take an F function, which in this case is rule. It's going to create rules. Then your list of labels, then the array, and then association. So imagine the generality of this, and then comma association.
Right. Well, I would argue that doesn't actually solve the problem.
No, it's an interesting function, but we need more icing on that cake, I think. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, such a function may or may not actually be useful, because I mean, if you can use this function, you may be able to just write it directly using inner, like Sean did here. But this doesn't solve the problem of I just want to declare that my data has column headings in my data set.
No, I understand. So, but the question, I mean, the other question is creating something that isn't a data set and it's just a bunch of nested, associations, right? So the issue is to turn an ordinary array, or perhaps an association with different labels, but let's start off with an ordinary array. What would be the way, do we have any way of what would be the way that we would turn that thing into an association with A, B, and C as the names?
Association thread, but it only works at one level.
Okay, so association thread of this with A, B, C, right?
Yes, I think one single level of list.
Just one level. Yeah.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So now why would association thread not take some kind of level spec?
Well, because if this works like thread or map thread, somehow you need to replicate tons of times the labels on the left-hand side.
Okay, I get it. So really this is this is something for, in a sense, full arrays where the same labels are going to be used many times, right?
Exactly. That's the notion of folding here. There is something that is being picked one at a time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that one needs that notion. I mean, in a sense, don't we have notions when we're dealing with sparse arrays and so on? Don't we have notions that are different depending on whether we're dealing with a full array where because essentially what we're dealing with here is that this thing is going to be replicated into every row, right? For example, in a multidimensional thing that is replicated into every row, because effectively what is happening, a way to think about it is we're simply renaming the indices. Instead of that being row index 2, it's row index B.
Yes, but that's the case. For example, notice that this association thread is automatically adding rule there without us specifying anywhere whether we wanted rule or rule delayed or something else. So it's fully dedicated to association.
Here's a crazy idea, okay? So the idea would be a thing called index replace, where, by the way, we have something of an echo here. Somebody, I don't know who's echoing here. I think Sean might be implicated because he joined when the echo appeared. But okay, the crazy idea here would be, I mean, this isn't quite right, but something like the first. Could we try to get rid of this echo? Are other people hearing the echo?
I can't hear an echo, but I'm on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear any echo either.
Okay, well, let's not worry about it. Okay, so then the proposal would be something like this, where what that means, where the full version of that would be something like this would be 1 arrow A, 2 arrow B, etc. Am I making sense? So that's saying take the indices at successive levels and map them into these things here. So for example, if you want one level to be purely, you know, you could have a level be automatic, which means just use the same, you know, just use the indices that came in from the original array.
So this is going to turn the array into an association?
An association of associations.
Association.
This thing here would turn it into, that will be the level 1, that's level 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying those are the rows, those are the columns, and this is now relabeling everything according to those, you know, those indices. I mean, I think this is, as a concept, this is fairly easy to understand.
Yes, I'm worried about the name. So if
No,
it's
I think the name may be wrong. Okay, go ahead. What were you going to say?
If it's going to return associations, then association should be in the name.
It isn't necessarily going to return associations. You can imagine, well, maybe it is going to return associations. I agree. Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, I was thinking you could imagine with automatic, for example, it might not. In fact, you could even imagine if you used automatic there, that it could turn associations into lists. Because automatic would just say, get rid of all those association labels and just flatten it out into a straight list. Did that make sense?
Could be. So I would expect automatic perhaps is keep whatever it has. And perhaps we have a word to remove them, like none or.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. None would be better there. Yep, you're right. Okay, but so does this achieve? I mean, this as an operation is something I've certainly wanted a bunch of times. I mean, it's a little weird, you know, arguably, in the case of a single list, it should work on, you know, the single list case should be the same, should be this case here that labels the columns. Next, rename, index. What would you call this?
So I'm thinking that this is related to keys and association. So some keying, or could it be an extension of association thread?
Let's remind ourselves how association thread works. I don't think so, would be my guess. I think association thread, I mean, I'm sort of partial to this idea that you can remap keys. I mean, which would suggest some kind of rekey, but that's really obscure. I mean, this is obscure as well, because this is basically, I mean, this is, you know, make things into, use keys for these, I don't know, index key. Other people have other thoughts about this.
I was wondering if we also wanted some symbolic representation of the headers instead of a symbol that actually do the computation.
Okay.
And this could be fed to any visualization symbol that we have, I don't know, table form or dataset. So we really keep the thing unevaluated. It's really a symbolic wrapper.
Well, in a sense, we have that here, right? I mean, the problem with all of those things is what if there are more elements? I mean, right here, I haven't addressed the question, if I only gave 3 labels, what happens if it's a 4x4 array? And the thing about replace is that it is somewhat natural in that case, because what we would do is if it's missing something, it would just be 4, for example. It would just be the original underlying, non-association key name, if you get what I'm saying.
Do we have a key replace already?
I don't know if we do. Why is this not working? Oh. Well, I can go here. Okay, let's try key replace. We certainly don't have. Key replace. We don't. I think it's a little obscure, key replace, because I think what this is doing, as you say, it is turning things typically into associations. Array to association, association array. Array association. Something like array association is not nuts.
So this would be a particular case of the function I was suggesting before, with the first argument rule and the last argument association.
Okay, let me walk through that. Here, let me save this somewhere. Sushma, I'm going to save this. Where should I save this?
ILD SW notes.
And then what? That's what I'm asking for.
Yeah, maybe we can make a folder thing.
I'm going to, since we don't have a name for the function.
Yeah.
This is a little hard to name. I don't think we have a miscellaneous function.
Yeah,
we do. We have a miscellaneous section. Look at that. I'm going to put it under miscellaneous.
Okay.
Never ever find it here, but you'll have to remember where it is.
Yes, yes.
And let's call it association array because that's the best thing I've seen so far.
Okay.
Actually, no, I'm going to call it fold thread because that's the most general thing I've seen so far. Okay, so let's understand your fold thread proposal for a second. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So its arguments are?
So it takes a function f, then it takes a list of labels.
Okay.
Let's call it, it's basically first arguments.
Okay.
And then it will be the second arguments, which is the and then a G.
Okay.
And then what this is going to do is it will go level by level of the second arguments and construct the f of first argument comma second argument.
Yes, I understand. And how does it know? Okay, so it's mapping down. I don't claim, I claim it's something more. Why is it folding?
Because it's taking one of the first arguments at each level. So it will consider for the first level of second arguments, it will take the first list in first arguments. For the second level of second arguments, it will take the second list in second arguments.
But unlike fold, which is generating kind of this streamer of stuff, this is generating a hierarchy of things, isn't it?
In a sense, yes.
I mean, I claim this is more like a map thread type play. How does this differ from map thread?
Because map thread will consider the same level of first argument and second argument at each time. Well, here we want the first element of first args with the first level of second args.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so what this is okay, so this is a map thread where, yeah, I mean, it's the difference between indices where it's looking at elements of first args rather than levels of first args.
Exactly.
And that's the same deal as this index replace thing is also the same idea, because it's basically doing index work, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what other functions do we have where we are going down? I mean, in a sense, we could imagine a version of map that does this, right? You could imagine a version of map. Okay, so map indexed, right, in a sense, is doing a simple version of this, right? Map indexed of expa is, but now you could imagine how many arguments does map indexed actually have?
3.
Just a level spec. Okay, so you could imagine a version of map indexed where you'd say map f expa level spec, and then you could say level lev items. So in other words, instead of just feeding in, we could do the exact same thing as here. We could say that could be a mapping of the indices. Is that what I'm saying? So instead of saying, so there, what we could do is at level 1, instead of the indices 1, 2, 3, we'd be feeding in ABC as the second arguments of F. Am I making sense? And somebody is sending me a chat. Arnaud, I got to tell you, whenever you send a chat which has multiple lines in it, the silliness of Zoom causes those multiple lines to not be copyable.
Oh, you want me to do one at a time?
No, you should send it by email if you want 3 lines. Sorry, I just can't copy this. I mean, it's well, I guess I could copy each line. I'm copying each line separately.
You put it
it's
on
kind
your
of a goofy piece
chat,
of design.
maybe?
That's possible. Hold on. Let's okay, so let's look at this. Okay, great. Okay, so you say keys value list. Okay. Yeah, well, I think that's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, well, you were asking for different idioms, I think, or different ways of thinking about it. This is how I typically think about it and how I do it, if I need to get something like that.
Yes, but how do you handle several levels at the same time?
I usually don't, because I don't, yeah.
Right, I mean, so what you want is, you want this kind of index replace thing. I mean, this is exactly what, with my, I mean, I don't particularly, the name index replace is a little weird. What do you think about association array as a name for this?
Well,
not sure what it has to do with array.
Well, because it's working on an array. It's kind of silly.
Two names that represent 2 super fundamental objects together. That's
kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Right.
And the end result is a data set, so maybe a data set should be part of the...
Well, it's not obvious that the end result needs to be a data set. It could be an array of, I mean, the fact that this is turning into a data set is a different thing, and maybe that is what we want.
Well, I mean, the very common case is like you have a CSV file and you want to, output a data set.
No, I know.
That's the only case I typically...
Right. But Itai has suggested that this actually be an argument to data set, the mapping. Sure. But I think we want a separate function that just does this, maybe. I'm worried that data set is going to need all kinds of other tentacles, particularly when we get to virtual data sets that have backing from outside databases and things like this.
And what about having options for dataset to take this, like the table headings and things like that?
Well, that is a possibility, yes. I mean, table headings basically does this. And that's an option that, it's an option from 30 years ago.
Right.
Right, but then you have to, if it has the table headings already in them, you have to excise them. Right.
If what has the table headings already in them?
If the data already has the headings in them, you'll have to excise them, right?
For what purpose?
Because table headings adds headings. It does not. It doesn't allow you to declare what to use as heading.
No,
It doesn't allow you to declare positions, which are headings. It allows you to add data, which are new heading.
Yeah, I get it. Right. Hey, listen, we've got Sean here. I want to know the answer to the question. Did we implement for this version import of a CSV as a data set?
Yeah, it's in 11.2.
And so when there are headings in the data set, in the CSV, or rather in the XLS file, if there are headings in the XLS file, what does it do?
Well, we haven't done this for XLS yet. We only have it for CSV. And in CSV, you really just have, your flat 2D data, and you can interpret like your first row as a heading.
And how does it specify that?
With an option, header lines.
Where is that option? Header lines. Number of lines to assume as headers. So if I say header lines and I say import as a data set here, then what happens if I have 2 lines of headings and I want to import as a data set? Does it make a list or something for every? What does it do?
It basically just uses the 2 lines combined.
How does it combine them? As a list?
With a new line, basically.
Right. It's right. These are strings, so it's basically string joining them, I guess, with a new line.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
Does that also? Does header lines also allow for row headings or just column headings?
Both.
Okay.
You have to, under the option, you specify it with a list for the number of rows and the number of columns to take.
N rows to skip. Wait a minute. Wouldn't it be by default? Oh, I see.
So if you have data, there's no notion of a header, so it just skips.
No, I understand. But what this is saying, if I say 1 there, header lines arrow 1, it's going to take the top row and treat it as a bunch of column labels, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's another operation that seems not completely useless for us to have, which is more similar to your map thread or array association thread thing, which is to take something which has already got a list in there and kind of turn it into. So look, there are 2 operations that seem useful. Given a collection of labels, insert them, a collection of labels for each level, insert them everywhere. Okay, that's one case. Another case is given a quotes composite array, use first rows, columns, etc. as labels. Is that right?
Yes, that's an interesting different thing. Yeah.
Right. So I mean that's the case of, so to give an example of that case, somebody had, I think, was it Itai had given that example up here? Yes, this one here, right? That's this case.
Yep.
Okay. And then this one is rather this case. Okay. So, and here, by the way, I mean, we could have, I mean, this is basically headers to keys is roughly what that's doing. Am I right?
I'm thinking of this similar thing with fold, in which when we have only one list, we decide that the first element is going to be this argument that we separate. as special.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yes. Well,
So,
again, let me come back to your your thing, which I don't believe is correctly named as fold thread. Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking that perhaps it's more like a nest rather than fold. It's a nest. It's a nesting of thread.
Yeah, but also we've got this thing here where MapIndexed. I mean, where we could in principle be relabeling. I'm sorry, what are you saying? That this thing is a nest of MapIndexed? Is what you're saying? Something like that?
A nesting of map thread rather than a folding of map thread. I'm thinking about your previous comment in which you were saying this is getting inside again and again.
Yeah, right. So this one here, the first arguments here would be things like, ABC, we'll just write out ABC XY. Right? The second argument is some kind of array.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was the G here?
The G is list or association, basically, or any other function.
I see. And realistically, that would be like association, and this would be like rule here.
Exactly.
Okay. And in principle, there's also a level spec here.
Yes, it could go up to some level, for example, rather than all levels.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Because it might want to take sublists somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, I need to go in a moment here, unfortunately. Let's look. This case here. So, by the way, the answer from Sean was basically yes, he's already done this. So that's great. Are there good examples in the documentation for this thing? And also, Sean, could you make sure that Chris Carlson knows for the workflows about importing spreadsheets to put in something about this?
Yeah, sure. There are examples, yes.
Good. Oh yeah, I see one right here.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, it's great. Okay, so you already did this. Although hopefully you can also do it for XLS where it can be much more automatic. Where with XLS, if you just give DataSet, is that in the works or is that not yet?
I am working on DataSet with Excel right now, yeah.
Great. Okay, all right. One last couple.
So what do you mean by more automatic, if I may?
Well, that you don't have to give header lines. So in other words, if the Excel file, am I going crazy or does Excel not distinguish? Does Excel distinguish? Could you tell?
I can't think of an easy way to tell that this thing is marked as a header with the API.
I'll tell you a way. Strings versus numbers, for example, right? If you've got a spreadsheet where there's a row of strings and then everything else is an array of numbers, then it's pretty much a dead giveaway, isn't it?
It seems pretty obvious. I wonder about performance.
Yes. Well, no. I mean that's a simple heuristic. I think you should try and understand that, right? Because I mean, worst case is you've imported, right? You know what? This is easy to do because, right, you import, and after importing, even if what you do is to check the first couple of lines, right? Say, oh, they're all numbers. First line, it's all strings. For second line, it's all numbers. Okay, and then you say, well, okay, let me go check the rest of it, and you can pretty quickly check that it's all numbers.
And this is for just the dataset element?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's
okay, is this an option that can be turned off?
Sure, yes, you can turn this off.
Okay.
Right. I mean, although you're never going to want to, never, ever, ever going to want to. It's always going to do what you want, in my opinion. I mean, just that's what I think. I mean, not imagining. Look, there are really wacky spreadsheets where people have written, random notes to their dogs on the, top 3 rows of the spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and then we have to know whether that's, and so there's a whole kind of machine learning adventure, which I don't think we've embarked on yet, to try to actually find the data inside the spreadsheet, so to speak.
I'll also add the mechanisms to do it yourself. So, I mean, you could skip those first 3 rows and then use the next one as a header.
Sure.
And that's the data set you get.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Okay. Last moment here. What are we going to call this thing? I mean, Headers to keys, blah. I don't really like that very much, but what this operation is definitely an interesting operation, this one here. So index rename. I mean, how will people think about it? I don't like that, but
associatize.
Yeah. All right.
We already have associate, so.
Nobody have other ideas? Okay, to be continued. Let's I mean, this is a really good function, and we need to have it. We just need to figure out what it should be called.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think still on the table is Itai's proposal that this be a second argument or second option to DataSet.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it should be a separate function, probably. All right, very good. Thanks all.
Okay.
See you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Talk to you later.
Bye.